hand over to Adrian. And good luck, Thuli. I'm sure that you're going to sail through it with your customary equanimity.
Paul, thank you so much for setting the scene for us. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It's really very exciting to welcome you to our very first Frontline event. I know that there have been a lot of selfies happening and people are sharing a lot of thoughts and questions, so please keep them coming on social networks. We're using hashtag News24 Thuli. And a very, very special welcome to our viewers who are watching us at home. It's so great to have you via live stream on News24. You're also a huge part of this conversation. We really, really want to hear from you, so keep those questions and comments coming on social networks. As Paul said, my name is Jerusha Sukthio-Rath, and I head up News24's video division. Advocate Madonsela, we can't think of a better person to start off our Frontline series with, so thank you so much for joining us. And I'm also joined by my editor and boss, Adrian Basson.
Good evening, Advocate Madonsela. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody watching. It's a real privilege to have with us tonight one of Time Magazine's 100 most influential people in the world, Advocate Thuli Madonsela, who is literally a few days before she hands in the keys to the Office of the Public Protector and sail off to a faraway island where she will reportedly be rocking the boat, securing comfort, and out of bounds.
But it's not going to be an easy week for you, and you're certainly not going to go off quietly. Just a few hours ago, News24 reported that you've received a rather, shall we call it damning or troublesome letter from the Gupta family via their lawyers, who say that if the family is implicated in your state capture report, it will be, and I quote, at your own peril. And according to the lawyers, and I loved this phrase, you left them flabbergasted by your findings. So what is your initial thought on all of this?
Well, good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. I haven't seen the letter from the Guptas. I absolutely have no idea what are they talking about.
Thank you.
Advocate, are you still planning to release your last investigative report? And you just previously mentioned to me that there's still a number of outstanding ones. Are you still planning to finish them by Friday when you leave the office?
There is a batch we're going to release on Friday, yes.
Excellent.
So we have to ask you this. At News24, we are absolutely delighted by the names of your reports. Securing Comfort for Nkandla, postponed delivery for the post office, derailed for PRASA. They're inspired. So please tell us, do you come up with those names, or who in your office?
I wish I did. No. Maybe I would account for 1 out of 100 reports. It is the investigator who decides what's the name of the report, but if the group think tank doesn't agree with the report, it goes to our national think tank, which takes a bite at it. And then it then comes to me and the quality assurance team. If we think maybe it's not quite right, we may change it. But sometimes it's not us who change it. It's anybody we can find who has a better idea. For example, I remember that the Secure and Comfort came from a communications officer.
Well, there are many things that we hope the new public protector takes on, but cool names for reports are definitely one of them.
Well, thank you. Well, thank the entire team. And we must say that also we didn't invent that idea. It is a global practice by public protector-like institutions. Canada, the Ontario Ombudsman has very, very interesting titles of reports, and UK also has very interesting titles.
Advocate, on a more serious note, where were you 7 years ago in your life, and how has the past 7 years changed your life?
7 years, I was enjoying myself at the South African Law Reform Commission, and I was busy with about 3 research processes. The one was prostitution, which was absolutely fascinating, about the possibility of legalizing sex work, or at least decriminalizing it. We had been on the road about it and getting views from the public. I was also leading a team on the interpretation of statutes at the Law Commission, and then the entire Project 25 as a full-time commissioner. And I had never thought I would leave the Law Reform Commission, because as a young person leaving high school and wanting to study law, I had this ambition to be part of changing the law so that I could bridge the gap between law and justice. And being at the South African Law Reform Commission provided me with that opportunity. Where am I now? It's been quite an epic journey, and I'm grateful for Gugu Dlamini's opportunity to work with the team to claw back some of the money that should be going to RDP housing, hospitals, schools, and just generally improving the quality of life of our people and freeing the potential of every person. It's been quite a wonderful journey. But I must say I live a little bit cynical about human beings. I really honestly used to take people at face value. If you come to me and you say, this is what happened, I used to believe you. And I now listen to everyone with a pinch of salt, because honestly I've just learned that humans lie with a straight face. One thing I've learned in 7 years.
My next question is to ask you, if years ago, give Thuli of 7 years ago some advice, would that be it?
Yes. Perhaps the advice I would give would be get that money at the beginning, before the honeymoon period. Before the honeymoon period ends, because really, if we look at the balls we've dropped, because we too have dropped some balls, it has a lot to do with case management. When our case management system packed up, we never got the money. And if a Gugu Dlamini comes and says, where's the report, we have to hunt for the investigator and the supervisor to find out where the case is. And you can't run an institution like that. It wastes a lot of time.
Do you think there were money, or do you think it was purposefully kept from your office?
Well, at the beginning, the money was there. I think eventually the money wasn't there because of this austerity measures.
What was the single biggest surprise in your 7-year term?
I think what surprised me was the generosity of the Gugu Dlaminis, the ordinary person. I have found that you come and investigate gross maladministration. This person has been owed money for years. Let's take Mr. Skosana. He had been owed his money since the 90s. You investigate and eventually gets his money. But when he eventually gets his money, he's just happy that the system works. And he goes around and says he's going to tell everyone to please come to the Pub Protector, the system works. And I honestly think that if people knew that with accountability, there's an opportunity for healing, and people are so forgiving, but they just want accountability or answerability and remedial measures when they've been wronged.
In really broad terms, your office has almost become synonymous with your Nkandla investigation, but of course, this is one of many, many of your investigations. So tell us about one that perhaps wasn't as highly publicized, but that you and your office are particularly proud of.
I would think about one recent one, which was an issue of law. The ones for me that I have found difficult are the ones that have involved interpretation of the law, and there's several of them. But I would take this one of a certain Mr. Gqoka, who built RDP houses for a municipality and finished them. However, before he finished building those houses, from the side of the municipality, money ran out. And on the other side, the project manager from the municipality told him to go ahead. So he built the municipal houses, and the houses were distributed to people in the name of the municipality. In the meantime, the municipality had gotten a conditional grant to build a full house, not half a house. But the municipality had used some of that money, the money for the top structure, for its own internal purposes, which is not allowed for conditional grants. When Mr. Gqoka wanted his money back, the municipality's answer was two questions. One was, give you the instruction to go ahead in writing. The second reason we didn't have a contract with you, you were a subcontractor. And on both kinds, it was true. He wasn't given an instruction in writing. And secondly, he wasn't the main contractor, was a subcontractor. But the reality was that he built the top structure with his own money from his own pocket, from a startup company. And because he paid for those top structures, the houses were delivered to people. Nobody was disputing that. He went to court, he lost the case. He lost the case on a technicality, locus standi. There was no contract and there was no relationship with the municipality. He then brought the matter to us. Initially, the province sent it back because of the fact that there was no contract. When it was taken to national review, which is me and the review team, we looked at it and said, we don't enforce contracts. We investigate maladministration and other forms of improper conduct. And we got that view from Holland. A case like this came up in Holland where a matter had got to court, and the court just looked at what was the issue investigated by the court, and if there was still an aspect that the court didn't look into, the ombudsman could still deal with it. In this case, we just looked at maladministration and concluded that was there maladministration? Certainly. There was money for top structure that was charged. If the money had not been charged, there would have been money for the top structure. We wouldn't be here. We looked at what happened, what should have happened. Is there a discrepancy? If so, was somebody harmed by that discrepancy? And how are we going to put him or her to where they would have been if there had been no maladministration or improper conduct? And obviously we found that Mr. Kocha, there was maladministration, and he was prejudiced by that maladministration because he paid for those houses, and he has no duty to give people houses. It's government's job. And the decision was that because of maladministration is out of pocket, he must be given his money with interest.
Fascinating.
Advocate, I find it interesting you referred now to chowing money and then service delivery. And I think I often find that in South Africa we talk about these things in isolation. We talk about poor service delivery, and then we see often people protesting, and then we talk about the mayor with his corrupt tender and his Mercedes-Benz in another story. How do you think we can bring these things closer? Because it is essentially, as you've just mentioned, it is one pot of money.
Yeah, absolutely right, Adrian. In fact, one of the main causes of non-delivery of service or poor quality delivery of services would be maladministration or the money being siphoned to something else, corruptly or just negligently. Bringing them together has begun to happen. With all of the cases that we've dealt with, people have started making the connection between abuse of state funds and lack of service delivery in their own lives.
Because often corruption, of course, is the kind of silent crime where there's no obvious direct victim immediately.
Absolutely.
Unlike other crimes, but ultimately the poor is the biggest victim of corruption.
Absolutely. Except in some cases there's an immediate link. For example, in Pipes to Nowhere, it was literally pipes to nowhere. They paid for a housing development, and they were supposed to end the toilets, the what was it called, the bucket system. And they built those toilets, and they built pipes that end right in front of the toilet that were not going to any piping system. And in the end, they were paid for that. But we found that the contract itself, there was corruption in just the award of the contract, but also paying for people for work not done is improper. But it was the improper relationships that allowed that. And people could immediately make the connection between the fact that the company was improperly hired and improperly paid and the fact that they had no toilets.
Let's talk a little bit about Nkandla, please. And your recommendations have been cited, particularly in this electoral year, as one of the big reasons for the ruling party's performance or poor performance this year. What do you say to comments like that, to analysis like that?
Jerusha, I'm grateful firstly to the Public Protector team for the scholarship that went into us arguing that the Power Protector's remedial action is binding, and you can't really equate the Power Protector with an ombudsman, which has only the power to investigate and report, when the Power Protector is a third power. The scrutiny that has gone into that and analysis has helped not only to get more people to understand the powers of the office, but it has helped students and other scholars to have an interest in this institution. Incidentally, the whole of Africa now wants powers that are binding, and I agree with my colleagues, because in Europe, the powers are not binding, but in reality is they implement. We had our colleague right now from Iceland who was saying, even though the statute doesn't say the powers are binding, but the practice, the tradition is such that once the ombudsman or the Power Protector-like institution is spoken, people implement.
Were you surprised by President Zuma's U-turn in that case? I mean, he was still gearing up for a fight in the Constitutional Court. And can you remember where you were when you heard that he had changed his case?
I was in his office.
Had you convinced him to change his case?
Well, we discussed where I came from, why we made the decisions we made, and why you can't say the powers of the office are the same as the original, what was it called, the Advocate General, which had only the power to report, to investigate and report. If you now have a third power with the power to take appropriate remedial action, it doesn't make sense to then reduce the power to two powers. And I explained to him what decisions were made and why, and he explained to me that he had received bad advice from his lawyers, and he too had now come to understand that the powers are binding.
And that was it?
And that was it.
As you face your last week in this office and look back, are you confident, or do you believe that as a country we have sufficient enough corruption-fighting structures, organizations in place in the country at the moment?
I am convinced the first structure is the people. I think the reason we talk about corruption in South Africa is because the people are saying no to it. From the day somebody tweeted about bribing a traffic officer and people went up in arms against that person on Twitter, it said to me, we have a nation that rejects corruption. It may happen here and there, but generally the ethos of the nation is against it. And so the first fighter against corruption is the ordinary people, the whistleblowers out there who stick out their necks to say there's wrongdoing, and which then initiates a newspaper story or an investigation by us, the Hawks, the Auditor General, and all others. Regarding the institutions, we have a fair number of institutions that fight corruption, but I'm convinced that we need more. If we're talking about those cases older than a year that are sitting in my office, a lot of them are about corruption. By the time we get to them, they will be like 7 years old, 9 years old, and these cases, you've got to investigate them within 3 to 6 months when the trail is still warm. Otherwise, by the time you get to investigate it, everything is cold, people are gone, documents have been shredded, computers have been thrown away.
Do you think it could also...
And the money has been used.
Right. Could it also be a staffing issue, that these organizations simply need more people?
No, absolutely. You need more people, but I still am convinced that we may have to think about an anti-corruption commission. I know that we say that we have enough institutions. The problem is that unlike Malaysia and Singapore, that have very aggressive anti-corruption agencies, we don't have one institution here that would say it's their role to tell people what is corruption. Right now, the average person in the street often thinks that any form of maladministration is corruption. That's good from the point of view of fighting maladministration, but it's bad in terms of the fact that the corrupt then thinks we're part of the majority. because all wrongdoing is corruption. We need a sense, everyone understand what is corruption, and we need a sense of prevention of corruption. An anti-corruption agency would entrench the values that make it difficult for people to accept corruption and to engage in it. Also, that same institution should be able to prosecute. At the moment, we are one of the anti-corruption agencies, but we have no power to prosecute, and we have no power to deal with the private sector if it's private to private. We can only deal with the private sector if the private sector is involved in state affairs.
Advocate Madonsela, it's very difficult to talk about corruption and fighting corruption and maladministration without referring to what have happened today, where the National Director of Public Prosecutions, Advocate Abrams, announced that the Finance Minister, Pravin Gordhan, and 2 others would be formally charged with fraud on the 2nd of November. Should South Africans be concerned tonight that either the political head of the Treasury is a fraudster, or that one of the very pivotal state institutions, and that should be independent and practice without fear of failure, has been used and has been abused to go after someone for reasons which are not primarily about fighting crime?
I like the way you put it, because it's either, yes, we have a Minister of Finance who's a fraudster, or there are shenanigans, and either way we should be concerned.
As you sit here, are you concerned that there are external influences involved in exerting influence over our state institutions?
I don't have evidence that there are hands from outside of these institutions that are involved. I would say that if there were hands that were involved, it would be said. What is important, though, is that we see an even hand, we see consistency. That's all I would say to government, is that if we're going to respect our law enforcement agencies, we have to make sure that all cases that have been reported, for example, at SABC we reported that some people gave themselves money that didn't belong to them, and some people then reported that to the police station. It would be nice then to see the NPA or the police handle those cases with the same rigor that some other cases are handled.
Advocate, President Zuma has severely criticized you in the past few days over your handling of the state capture investigation. He says that he wasn't properly given the opportunity to give his side of the story, and he also wants an opportunity to interrogate your witnesses. Were you a bit harsh on the president this time?
No. The president was the first person to be informed about the allegations being made, and the letter that I wrote to him on the 22nd of March explained exactly what is the nature of the allegations against him, and what are the implications of those allegations, because the second complainant had indicated that I should investigate a possible violation of the Executive Ethics Code by the President. The President saying he didn't know that he was under investigation, he thought the investigation was against his son, is inconsistent with the letter that was written to him, which was specifically saying we've been asked to investigate the possibility that he may have violated the Executive Ethics Code. The letter of the 22nd of April specifically indicated that we had proceeded with the investigation because under the Executive Members Ethics Act, I have a peremptory duty to investigate, unlike under the Public Protector Act, where I have discretionary power to investigate or to choose not to investigate.
Why do you think the president waited until your last week in office to tell you that he's got a problem with your investigation?
He honestly would be the one person who could answer, or more specifically his lawyer, would be the person to answer that question. Because when we requested a meeting and asked him to answer questions, and he gave us a date of the 6th, there was never an indication that there's any problem at all. And we went to the office on the 6th with no indication prior to that there's a problem. Only at the meeting were these issues raised. Again, we discussed it. We even gave him the question. I read the questions onto the record to give him a sense that they're really about what he may recall and simple questions. We agreed then that he was going to answer them by way of an affidavit, which was a request of one of his advisors, and that to supplement his answers or to clarify any issues I may need clarification on, would have a meeting on Monday. We all went home on Thursday. We had Friday, we had Saturday, we had Sunday. No indication that there was any trouble. Monday morning we sat there, we never went anywhere, waiting to be told when to come, and we were never told to come. We were then told that the legal advisor at some stage is going to contact us. He never did. We eventually contacted him, and he said he doesn't have an answer, but there's a letter that's coming. So for the first time late afternoon on Monday did we discover that the president is not in a position to answer those questions, and that he would like to interview witnesses. Had he told us last week that he would like to interview witnesses, we would have arranged for him to give us the questions so that we can put them through to the witnesses, because it is an inquisitorial proceeding, and the president, yes, has a right in terms of Section 7(9) of the Public Protector Act to examine witnesses through the Public Protector, and the process has to be determined by the Public Protector based on what she considers expedient in the circumstances. In the circumstances, would have thought that had he just given us the questions to put through to the witnesses, would have done so by now.
Because there is some confusion in the public around that aspect, whether he has got the right to physically sit and interrogate, almost cross-examine your witnesses. That's not how I read your act.
Not in inquisitorial proceedings, but you can have people present in one room, but it's still the questioner is the presiding officer, not the lawyers, as it is the case in accusatorial process or an adversarial justice system.
Can we for a moment just pause on this topic of state capture, because it's really entered our body politic and the general lingo of South Africa over the past few months. How do you think the public should use this term state capture? What does it mean for you? What do you think is the definition of state capture?
I really don't know what is the definition of state capture, and I'm glad you're asking that question, because there has been some groups that have cropped out of the woodworks and saying we should investigate on all forms of state capture. We chose not to investigate state capture. We chose to investigate the specific allegations made by the people who asked us to investigate. Those specific allegations were whether or not the president had any role in the alleged offer of a ministerial post to Deputy Minister Jonas by the Gupta family, and whether the president had any role in the alleged offer of a ministerial post to then chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Public Enterprises, Ms. Faiki Mentra, whether the president had any role in the alleged pressure being put on Mr. Maseko to give tenders to the Gupta family. And the last issue is a complainant who hasn't said there's wrongdoing. He suspects there might be wrongdoing. He simply asked us to establish why the cabinet got involved in a private dispute between the Gupta family and the banks, whether this is normal, it has ever been done before, and whether there might be corruption, and then asked why was this matter not dealt with by the National Consumer Commission or the Banking Ombudsman.
In your time in office, you've been called all sorts of things, from a spy to a DA agent, and you've even been called things that, in my estimation, men in positions such as yours don't get called. You've been called the woman with the ugly nose, for instance. Has there ever been a point where these types of insults or taunts have affected you, or how do you deal with them?
Most of them, I found them funny, that when people are scared, they behave like children. And thank you. But at times I felt sorry for my accusers, because having a life that is not of your own is the most miserable thing that can happen to you in life, where you're doing someone else's bidding because they pay you to do so. I think it's the saddest thing that could happen to a grown-up. And for me, I have compassion for those people. But I must say that with the spy allegations, I had two emotions. The one emotion was an emotion of finding it really funny, and we've laughed about those all the time with my team, just about how can somebody be so dumb that if you're going to frame someone, at least hire somebody who can create a credible story. I don't know if you have seen it. If you've seen it, just my CIA card is the poster of the pup protector. Why would the CIA use the poster of the pup protector? Don't they have their own cameras? Then my email address is Thuli Madonsela at Gmail. What are the chances that spies communicate like that? Or at least we see them in the movies. They communicate with codes and things like that. What kind of spies are so stupid to use their real names? And the email, it's Thuli Madonsela at Gmail. And then how do I spy? I'm spying in the one version. There's 3 versions of spying. I'm not going to go into them, but they don't correlate with each other. On the one, my handler is an American professor. On the other, my handler is a politician. And then on the third one, my handler is a judge. And these stories are not coming together.
You had 3 handlers.
Yes, I've got 3 handlers. 1 spy, 3 handlers. And I'm a spy for Mossad. I'm a spy for MI6 and CIA. I think they only miss the KGB. It's just not the KGB. But the last story, the one I said, there was sadness and also finding these hilarious. The last bit of the hilarious part of these accusations was that the allegation that was investigated by the government of South Africa, which I discovered when I was in another country abroad, was the one where it says that I spy for the American government using my colleagues in other countries, and the purpose of our spying is to find out which African presidents hate America. Now, why would Americans want to find that information through somebody sitting in South Africa and using public protector-like institutions in other countries? Because their relationship with government is like mine, it's arm's length. So why wouldn't you find people inside the system? It's all so ridiculous. But the sad part was the government of the Republic of South Africa announced to the world that those allegations that came from a blog that was on the internet for about 4 days or so were being investigated seriously. That was sad.
Perhaps you should check thulimadonsela@gmail.com. You may find all sorts of letters.
Maybe. Well, I think the part that my team has said we really need to do is to find that bank, because in the spy allegations, in one of the spy allegations, I think the one where my handler is an American professor, one of the allegations, by the way, is that he arranged for me to get my junior degree 2 years after I'd left the university. 1989, I got my degree in 1987, but I'm so dumb that I needed an American professor to arrange for me to get a degree. But the part that we find fascinating is that I think I have 150 million, 15 million US dollars in an account in the Cayman Islands, and would like to get our hands on that account.
That's the island I was referring to.
Yeah, because we would like to find out if the money exists, and if it's in my name, let the public protected team get it.
Advocate, did you ever receive a final outcome from the state investigation into these allegations?
No, they've kept on telling the public. I think the State Security Agency has been announcing time and again that the investigation is underway.
Did you ever fear for your life?
There were some times when I was concerned, but principally more for my family. And yes, there were some threats. And in the last few months, there was even a direct one.
And how did your family react to this?
My family was always concerned. My brother even met with some people to ask, is this proper? If somebody is doing their job, why must you order heat? He had discovered that some people had ordered a heat on me. The media also was aware of it. I think it was during the height of Nkandla. So he met with some people in a particular political organization, because my brother is a member of a particular political organization, to just ask, why is this being done? She's just doing her job.
Mm.
Yes.
Now, speaking of family and particular political organizations, last year I remember reading a Twitter headline that said, Madonsela joins the EFF. And when we clicked on it, it was, of course, speaking about your daughter. So I wondered if there are any topics of conversation around your dinner table, political or otherwise, that are off limits in the Madonsela household.
No, nothing is off limits. And I guess that's why my children have felt that they have the liberty to join whoever. I did, though, in the early years, prefer that none of them should be a member of any political party, or at least not be a visible member of any political party, because it might have ramifications for me. But also people in political parties wear their T-shirts, and nobody then is allowed to wear a T-shirt of their political party at my house. So they can wear it somewhere else. But regarding what people say, my children are they're very committed social justice activists. My son is highly concerned about social justice, environmental justice and education justice. My daughter, as you know, has started the I Am Jackson campaign even before the Fees Must Fall campaign, and they're very concerned about those issues, and I let them be who they want to be.
Advocate, you've launched a wonderful initiative in the form of the Fees Must Fall Fund, which has already raised, I believe, almost 700,000 rand.
Yes, thank you to Corporate South Africa for responding positively.
So I think we can clap for that. And thank you to you for launching it. So my question is, if you were a law student at Wits today, on which side of which fence would you find yourself in what's going on in our campuses?
If I was a law student at Wits today, being a grown-up as I am, I would not be radical, of course. I would be saying the kind of things that I'm saying today, that let's get back to school and let's negotiate. Whilst we're already studying, let's not lose the year, because poor students are going to suffer more and industry is going to be affected. And a whole lot of things are going to be impacted negatively. But that's a grown-up talking. If we are asking if that had happened 25 years ago, or even 30 years ago, I don't know which side of the coin would I have been, because when we are feeling the heat, your ability to think about ramifications is not always where it should be. I spoke to, recently, we were guests of the Prime Minister of Lesotho, and he told us about an animal which I keep trying to remember, but it ends with Budi. that kind of an animal. And he was telling us about when people who feel disempowered fight, they often fight in ways that harm them as well. And he told us about this animal that scratches itself when it's angry, when it feels aggrieved, to the point that it disembowels itself and dies. And perhaps if I'm a student, I could behave like that animal. But it doesn't take away the justness of the cause. The cause that is being fought is that the oppressed have, because we don't always listen. We don't always listen until there's a protest. I remember going to a workshop organized by SERI. SERI is this social justice network. And I was asking them, why do they have to ban things? And this young fellow, Tapelo, said to me, because government never listens until something is banning. That's their view, and we need to convince them, people, the disadvantaged in our society, that somebody is listening, and that you don't have to ban anything before you get heard. And we can do so by strengthening institutions, supporting constitutional democracy. That when a matter comes to the public protector, there's enough staff for that matter to be processed fast, and there's enough listening in government to ensure that whatever remedies emerge from that process are implemented. If the Human Rights Commission takes it, also there is that listening ability and implementation of remedies.
We each have one last question for you, and I'll make mine quite quick, because we are asked this constantly, and we've been asked to ask you this. I know that Advocate Hoffman wants you to fulfill this very specific role for him coming up soon, but if you were to be asked by enough people to run for president, would you?
Definitely no, and he has no right. And Advocate Hoffman can't ask me anything because he's a complainant.
Advocate, my last question from me is, if you had to give 3 pieces of advice to your successor, Advocate Gwebane, what would that be?
I would say be the public protector you have been before you come, because titles just give us the authority to do what we've already been doing. And if you're committed to protecting the public, you have to do so. We come into this spaces not to protect government, but to be of help to government. So that would be the first advice. The second advice would be get money as fast as you can, whilst there's still a honeymoon period. And thirdly, work with the team. It is often said that the job of a public protector or an ombudsman is a lonely one. I've never felt lonely because the team has been part of the decision making and part of the defense force when the headwinds came.
Advocate Madonsela, I don't think you ever have a reason to feel lonely, and we just want to show you why.
Right. I always have to do what I think the Constitution requires me to do, and what is required to protect the public. The public protector is there to protect the public.
Thank you, Thuli, for being faithful to the people of South Africa. Great service. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thuli Madonsela, for being a great ambassador for South Africa and to the people of South Africa. And we just hope and pray that the next person, the next public protector, will do a better job, if not a greater job than you did.
Thuli Madonsela, sifuna ukuthi kuwe enkosi kakhulu ngomsebenzi owenzileyo for ikhantri. Siyabulela.
Like, thank you, Thuli, for let's Zuma paying the money back.
I just want to say thank you for Thuli, and my God must bless her more years for her, because she's doing very good here in South Africa for us. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Mrs. Madonsela, for your service to the country. We wish you all the best for your road ahead. With love, South Africa.
Thank you, Thuli, for keeping us safe and for giving us hope.
Thuli, my name is Danny and I'm from the beautiful city of Cape Town. I want to thank you for your support and your trust and your commitment to this country and its people, for being the watchdog that you've been, and you're one of those people that will go down in the history as the public prosecutor. We love you and respect you. Thank you.
Thank you for the country. Thank you for shutting down.
Say bye. Consuma,
Thank you very much. Thank you, Thuli.
Wow.
Of course, on behalf of News24, we're so grateful that you spent this time with us, but even more so when we hit the streets and asked people what they'd like to say to you. This is the response. So thank you.
Thank you. I don't know what to say. I am lost for words.
Is that a first?
She had me at a loss for words. Ladies and gentlemen, we're now going to open the floor for a few questions to Advocate Madonsela while we have her here. I see a hand at the back there. We've got a roaming mic. Kate, where are you?
Kate is going to roam.
Oh. Paul, are you also going to roam?
I will look after the timekeeping. I also need to be here so that I can see who's asking the questions. Otherwise, nobody's going to win the prizes. And just on a point of clarity, in case anybody got confused, when I talk about an integrity commission and Advocate Madonsela talks about an anti-corruption commission, we're talking about the same thing. A new Chapter 9 institution that slots in between the public protector and the Auditor General and goes after the seriously corrupt in our society. That's what we need more than anything else at the moment, other than fresh underwear for the president.
Can we start with a question at the back, please? Just introduce yourself and then your question.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chaco Malima. I'm a young business owner. I would love to congratulate Ms. Madonsela for her wonderful work. Testing.
We can hear you.
Yes. I would love to congratulate Advocate Madonsela for the lovely work she has done. But I'm deeply disappointed in some of the issues that she didn't cover during her term. And one of them is that currently our government has promised through youth entrepreneurship. I mean, the city of Joburg has said that they're going to start allocating contracts, tenders to youth-owned enterprises. Even President Zuma, in the country that he is in now, President Uhuru Kenyatta has dedicated 30% of all Kenyan procurement to youth-owned enterprises. But I'm a young businessman in the construction, and what government is saying in the headlines and on the papers is not what is happening on the ground. And I'm very fearful because the students now that are marching for free education, who's going to employ them if we, the current young business people, are not given opportunities to create opportunities for them to get employment? So I would like Advocate Madonsela to liaise with Advocate Mukwebane for her to assist us as youth-owned enterprises to get a bigger share in government procurement and also in the private sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Shall we take another one or two questions?
Thanks. We're going to take another 2 questions.
Yeah.
Sure.
Then everybody gets a prize. Isn't that wonderful? Okay, who's next?
Kate,
Kate,
can you just wait for the mic, please?
The mic is coming across. We'll give
Gentlemen
you
at
this
the
mic and that'll be quicker.
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. My name is Joe. I'm employed. And I also want to appreciate Advocate Thuli for the wonderful work that you have done. I always said that when I grow up, I want to be like you, because I want to learn how you keep your cool, especially in the difficult situation. But the question that I have for you, I'm going to take you away from Gauteng. There's a case that you've been handling around Limpopo, around Nandoni Dam. There's a community that was moved there, and I'm not sure if you have made pronouncement around it. Is there any update around the challenges of that community? Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Advocate Madonsela. I'm Takarani Murati. I just happen to be one of the whistleblowers, but I'm not here to ask about that. Just need to check. My understanding of your history is that you are a former NK operative, and I would like to that. No. She knows how to operate an AK-47. That I know. When you were appointed, I don't know whether you were appointed or deployed to the public protector position. Were you ever given a specific briefing, and did you go against that? Because the impression that the public has is that now you did not follow the mandate. Thank you.
Wow.
Actually,
Right.
Jacob Zuma said you must act without fear or favor, and he didn't believe you were going to do it. Well, that's the story.
Right. The first question regarding youth entrepreneurship, the public protector can only help if a promise was made and the promise has not been kept. It is something that I can include in the head of a report that you have raised this question. What she would do is to find out if there has been pronouncement to that effect in terms of policies and plans that have not been kept, and then hold the necessary parties accountable. Having said that, though, my message to young people is don't create businesses that depend on state tenders, because to have a sustainable business that I would love to have a chat with you after this, young fellow, because I like the fact that you're doing something, and if you have a business, that means you are a creator of jobs, and I think that's extremely important. The advice about creating a job that depends on state tenders is because it's not sustainable. It's a hazard to your own business, because to have sustainability in state tenders, you have to be corrupt, because you always, no, that's true, because you have to always make sure that you have a tender. So you've got to diversify your business so that you can get business from elsewhere. The one proposal I made this morning at the Young Presidents Organization was, how about if businesses in South Africa that are successful were to use the model that is used by Dragon Den, where instead of business giving me free shares or shares and letting me go and play golf somewhere else, or they're giving me some governmental relations post, business invests in my company. The successful business person invests in my company and teaches me skills on how to be sustainable. In that way, we create more jobs and we create more sustainable businesses. What then they would have to do is to change the BEE model also, to take into account people who are investing in these small businesses, because that creates a larger economic cake and it creates more sustainable small businesses, because then those businesses will not depend on government for tenders. They'll be viable to operate in the open market, including the African market and later the rest of the world. To you, say, on Nandoni, thank you for asking that question. I always say that Advocate Mushana has been given more than his fair share of criticism, and certainly less than his fair share of praise, because he was the first person to start making those decisions with concrete remedies, and Ndoni Dam was one of those. I came in at the point where it was the implementation of remedial action. At the time we started, there was movement. Then later the committee, my team told me that the committee had said they're working with government and we needed to step back for a little while. More recently, we've been told that some of the promises have not been implemented. My team is back into the process to make sure that whatever was promised is being implemented. And to you, sir, you mustn't talk about things you don't know about. So I would let us leave that particular chapter, but go to the one about what did the president, what was the promise. No, nobody gave me a briefing about what I needed to do. I honestly understood the brief was to protect the public and be a friend to government, because a true friend doesn't tell you that the coast is clear when you're headed for a cliff. A true friend tells you that you're headed for a cliff. And the true friend is like the Makatsi in the Venda culture. She's the eyes and ears of the king and tells the king, you people are unhappy, sir, because you've eaten most of the food or you've done this and that. And the wise king listens, and the foolish one ignores her at his own peril. And that's what I expected. But after I did Against the Rules, there was a conference that I attended where I presented, and I said the reaction I got there was similar to what my colleague in Kenya got. If you've read that book, it's Our Turn to Eat, where he said he got a sense that there was this unspoken rule, like in the mafia, you don't touch the family. And then I said at that conference, my understanding is that the ANC is not the mafia, and therefore there's no code that says you don't touch the family.
How many years ago?
That was 2011.
I think the second part of that question you didn't answer. How do you keep your car?
I'm not sure Andile is going to agree that I'm always calm. I would say most of the time I'm calm. It's really about managing the gap between a trigger and what you do. But the simplest approach is try not to be hungry.
Angry.
Hungry. Try not to be hungry during the day.
It's like 3 more questions. There was one hand in the front, yeah?
We're going to take another round of questions because Adrian's feeling generous.
Oh, yeah.
There's one in the middle, in the front. And we've got a mic hand.
And then at the back.
My name is Karen Human. I am the secretary of a Catholic priest, which I think is an interesting thing to be. I was horrified along with everybody else yesterday when I watched what had happened to a Catholic priest in light of this fees must fall. I heard what you said about students feeling perhaps that government doesn't listen until something is burning, and it most certainly is burning now. And I wondered what advice you would give to a young person. I drove 2 young boys to cricket today, one in grade 11, one in matric. And I asked the boy in matric, what are you going to do next year? And he said, ma'am, I was going to go and study to be an investment manager. And now I don't know if I'm even going to study at all. What advice do we give the young people?
Advocate Thuli Madonsela, you make us proud. You know, as a country, as a people, and you give us hope. 2 questions quickly, if I may. The first question, where to for you from here? Is the public, are you going to be lost to the public, based on the plans that you have going forward? The second question, talking about corruption, the corruption within government is actually highlighted. Is there a balance in terms of equally going after, corrupt people, corrupt practices within the private sector, or powerful people with money getting away with just a slap in the wrist as far as you are concerned? Is there a vacuum in the private sector to create equally, powerful agencies that would later make us say the same things that we are saying to you about you and your institutions that you're making us proud? Thanks.
Last question at the back then. Thank you.
Are we waiting? I didn't get your name. You're not going to get your prize if I don't get your name.
My name is
Muraki, thanks.
Okay, good day. My name is Kofi. First and foremost, to the entrepreneur there, I must first and say that I admire you for what you're doing. I totally respect. In terms of my advice to you personally is that as an entrepreneur, you need to create opportunities and not wait for someone to give you opportunities. So the best advice is find a way to make it work and not wait for government to do something. We all have our democratic rights, so you can choose which path to take in terms of that. But I really do admire you in terms of that. Thuli, I've got two folds of questions to ask. Looking at the Pravin Gordhan situation, my question is in terms of where do we try to balance the needs of a nation? Because if he, for example, gets implicated, it has a negative effect on the economy as a whole. So how do we necessarily balance that aspect in terms of how to proceed from an ethical perspective? The second question I have, I don't know if you'll be able to answer this, is looking at Mr. Zuma's cases and the cases that he's been through, how does he manage to maneuver his ways around these cases, and he's no matter what is thrown at him, he's always still standing?
Thanks. I think that's the very last question. I'm very pleased to say that the prizes have multiplied, so there will be 6. Somebody else want one?
You're a journalist.
We can't
We
say
know
no.
you.
We can't say no.
Can I quickly answer these 3 so that I don't forget?
Let's take this round first. Let's take this round, then we have a last one.
Okay, we'll come back to another round.
Okay.
Over to you two.
Maybe I'll start with the last question. First, thank you for the kind feedback about the work we've done as the Power Protector team. Somebody asked recently, isn't it odd that you're being praised for doing your job? It's almost as if South Africans are shocked that you have done your job. And it is a bit of an oddity, but we are grateful for the positive feedback, knowing, of course, that there are many other South Africans that are doing as much and even more, but behind closed doors. And thanks to the media, our work as the Power Protector team has been seen by everyone in the country and abroad. So thank you for the kind remark. Regarding the president, I don't want to answer that question about whether he has dodged things or not. I think it would be unfair for me as a Power Protector to answer. But all I can say about the Minister Gordhan issue is just for the people to respect the law must be seen to be fair and just. And that's what the first Minister of Justice in democratic South Africa used to believe in, Dala Oma. If people think that the law is selective, people stop respecting it. I would just then say, let's look at who else has been accused of similar things, and let's make sure that if those things are being pursued, let them be pursued consistently and with the same vigor. That's all I would say on that one. On the Miss Human, what do we say to a child who is preparing for matric next year? Tell him that we're still hoping against hope that the academic year will be saved, that people are working day and night to try and convince the young ones that much as we know that they have a legitimate fight against social injustice, and we know they are hurting, what is happening is going to hurt the poor more. I was on Power FM for quite some time last night and trying to convince some of the young leaders that the cause is just, but the means that are being used are causing more damage to the people who already have been affected by the injustice. And you're right, it's not just the young ones that won't have a space next year. Somebody who's poor, who's been eating bread, one loaf of bread for the whole week, which is what we found at the University of Pretoria, sleeping in bathrooms, sleeping in libraries, sleeping in corridors, already has a job at PwC, at Standard Bank, or at some other place, and he's hoping that come beginning of January, the 3rd of January, he will have a dignified life or a decent life, and he will use the financial ability he has, or whatever is left after he has paid NSFAS, to uplift his family. So the conversation is saying to young people, let's look at alternatives that don't create more harm than good. And that's what I would say to this young person. Hang in there. We've also we've suggested this fund where some of them are saying we've only paid 5,000 Rand for registration. We're saying if we create this fund, then we can rescue these ones from violence, because for them they have nothing to lose, because they will be discontinued anyway, they'll be excluded, they will suffer financial exclusion, and this fund is going to help them. One of the things we've asked though is we don't want to manage any fund as the Public Protector team. We just kick-started it. Some NGO that does social justice fund collection should emerge and make itself known to the Black Management Forum and take care of the fund. And what our role is ended there in terms of that particular fund. But I've heard a young girl saying she wants to donate 500 Rand. And that's good. If somebody has 20 Rand to donate, let's donate it. It will make people feel they're not alone, and therefore they don't have to harm society. I don't know if anyone has seen the Phantom of the Opera, when that guy is cruel to society and they ask him, the little girl, the young lady asked him, why does he do all of these things? He says, but society has never been compassionate to me. Why should I be compassionate to this? So we have to show that we care as society, and it's gonna work. There's one question that I didn't answer, sir, ma'am.
It's Lumka.
In the front about what are you doing next?
And I had said,
sir.
From here, and I also asked you a question about a possible vacuum at the private sector.
Yes, on corruption. There is a vacuum in the private sector because the current anti-corruption model is a multi-agency one. As a public protector, I can only deal with the public protector if the public protector was involved in a state tender. That's the only time we can touch the public sector. If it's public sector versus private sector, for example, the whole thing of that Group 5 and all of the stadium ones, people are always say, oh, when it's black people, we call it corruption. When it's white capital, we call it collusion. That's not true. It was the agency that investigated was the Competition Commission. It had to frame it within its legal powers. Somebody else then needed to pick it up and investigate the corruption part, and it couldn't be us unless you could find state action in the process. The only agency that can do it now are the ordinary police or the hawks. But the difficulty with that is the hawks deal primarily with organized crime or serious crime. If your corruption involves bribing a traffic officer, it then goes to ordinary police. We don't have an agency, as in Mauritius, that collects all corruption and also then educates around what is corruption. When should you know that you're being corrupt? So there is that vacancy. There is that vacuum. What am I doing next? I'm going to go back to civil society and do my best to protect the public, as I always did as an ordinary lawyer, using my skills to promote the rule of law, social justice, and constitutionalism. I will be practicing law in 2018 and teaching law, but next year I'm taking a sabbatical, hopefully spent mostly abroad. But it's just next year. And then
Write a memoir, please.
Yes, I am planning to write one and also to collaborate with colleagues on a book on administrative justice that brings the public protector in the ombudsman institution that is a growing institution into the sphere of administrative justice and exploring the role of this institution in leveling the playing field, because it has enormous potential. I would like to write about a lot of stories about city old men on the one side. That side there's a minister, there's a deputy minister, there's a DG, there's an SC from outside and an attorney and their internal legal services people. And this old man is sitting next to another old man. But as a public protector, you can honestly be able to level the playing field. And it doesn't matter who's overrepresented, who knows the law better, because you have the power, as the SCA said, to find the law on your own, to find the facts on your own, and to ensure that justice is safe. So I'll be writing about that. And the last question, ma'am, you were going to clarify Lumka. It has been answered. Thank you.
Can we take the last question there, Tandeka?
Hello, my name is Tandeka Kubule. I work for the SABC. I'm one of the SABC 8. And I am asking a question out of, just as a citizen, not really as a journalist, even though I am a journalist. I'm worried about grand corruption. The spectre where you have private, powerful interests, commercially powerful, laying siege to the state and misdirecting policy and directing it towards private interests. It could be any parastatal that happens to it. Could be the SABC, it could be the capture of a legislature or stuff like that. What I am worried about, and I think increasingly those in my fraternity are seeing, is that many institutions buckle under, and that all you really have left is the judiciary and your institution, and some aspects of the press left to stand between the people and this growing octopus that, you know, just gobbles up institutions. And it happens apparently in economies in transition, and it's very visible in economies like Russia and some of the former communist countries. It's a world in which I think we are fast approaching, where the rule book, the laws count for nothing. The rule books are torn up and we simply rule by might. I think as one of the SABC, we are living evidence of that phenomenon. There isn't a single avenue we have not explored. Please help.
Thank you. My name is Thuli Madonsela. I am from News24. Public Protector, I just wanted to get just a bit of clarity. There's been a lot around the state capture, the much anticipated state capture report. I just wanted to find out, the page that you're releasing on Friday, is that the final report? Has it been sent to respondents, or will there be some work left for your successor to look into? Thank you.
That's it. Thanks.
All right, are we done? Yes. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Tandeka, and thank you, CD. Perhaps let me start with the easy one, TD's question. The report that we'll release will be part one of a two-phased approach. We've indicated to the parties as we started the investigation that it was always going to be a two-phased approach. And this phase we will tell the story that we know by now. and whatever else needs to be done, we will indicate what needs to be done and who will do it. And Ms. Kubule, the question that we're raising is extremely important. That's why we need an integrity commission or an anti-corruption agency, because every time people think about corruption, they think about bribes for an immediate service. We don't always understand that policy itself is a terrain that can be captured through corruption, where then policies or legislation is made to favor a particular a person because they've paid in advance, and they don't always pay a bribe. Gratification, which is the concept used in the Prevention and Combating of Corrupt Activities Act, could be in any form. It could be to give me a position somewhere at my church, or to give me to pay for my child to do something. It's many things, many ways of just giving me value for making a dishonest decision, or an incomplete decision, or a distorted decision. What is the way forward? I believe our best insurance is let's mobilize on the ground. That's why institutions such as the media, your institution, Accountability Now, Corruption Watch, are important. It's important that every person understand what is corruption and what does it take away from them. And one of the things it takes away from them are policies that are based on the Constitution, and policies that give priority to constitutional responsibility. Section 237 of the Constitution says constitutional responsibilities should be given priority. But through corruption, something else might slip through and be made policy when it shouldn't have been policy. The courts should also be used, though, where we think something violates the Constitution. I think increasingly we'll have to use the courts. Even these institutions, we mustn't make the mistake
Thank you. Have you got your winners, Paul?
I think that everybody is a winner. I snuck a couple of extra copies into my bag because I knew it would be too hard to. But there were no lousy questions. They were all good, actually. But I suppose that's because we've all been stimulated by the questions asked by our interrogation team. I think you fielded them with your normal equanimity. Obviously had a nice long meditation before you joined us today. And I think that we do need to give the entire panel, the people in the white chairs, a hearty round of applause. The prize giving is going to take place here. The people in the front row obviously get their prizes first because they were good enough to sit in the front row, without fear, favour or prejudice.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. This was the first News24 Frontline. Join us again next time. Advocate Madonsela, thank you so much, not only for being here tonight, but what you have done for South Africa. And we hope to hear from you again in the future, whether you write for us, whether you contribute. First go and have your sabbatical and come back full of ideas and plans.
It's been an honor, and good luck with the Frontline going forward.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, there's something to drink outside. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.